Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, and welcome back to the channel for the post-playoffs Smite 2 tier list. I did plan on making this video a bit sooner after the playoffs concluded, but I just had a lot of other stuff in the works that I wanted to get out before this, but we're here now. We're going to be doing a ranking of all Smite 2 gods based on my own experiences as well, but largely based on what happened at the playoffs. A lot of new stuff came out, a lot of stuff that we thought was good turned out to be not as great, so definitely time to update the tier list in my opinion. We've got 6 tiers. We've got the S+ broken tier, S top picks, A just good, B kind of mid, C not great, and then D bad. So without further ado, let's just jump right in with our first pick, which is Amaterasu, which I think I'm going to throw straight into the top picks category. Amaterasu performed really well at the playoffs, and we all kind of knew she was one of the top gods in the game even before that. She had a pretty good showing in solo lane and a surprisingly good showing in jungle as well, especially NA pulled out a lot of armor jungle and it worked out really well with a good win rate at playoffs. The god is just really strong. She's super hard to kill with the amount of movement speed and healing that she has. Even if you're not building like full tank, she's still very hard to lock down and kill. She does an absolute crap ton of damage, especially if you throw in a couple of damage items in there. You can go for a little bit of int if you want. You can go for a more strength based like Death Toll build. You can kind of do whatever you want on Amaterasu and she works pretty well. And of course brings that big CC team fight ultimate, which is all the more impactful in Smite 2 and the one relic system. So Amma definitely a top pick right now. Anher, I think I'm going to throw to mid. Anher did have a decent performance at the playoffs. He was the third most played ADC, but he was light years behind Jingwei and Kurnanos in my opinion. And also in the pros opinion, of course, he was definitely picked way less than those two. And I think the only reason Anher was really picked is if like Jingwei and Kurnanos were off the table. He was just kind of like a fallback pick. I don't think the god is like super amazing, honestly. I think he's just playable, which is why he's in the mid category. And even though he was the third most picked ADC, as I said, he was behind the top 2 ADCs by an absolute mile. And honestly, I don't think ADC is a particularly strong role in Smite 2 at the moment. I think ADC is in a relatively bad spot with how strong cooldown reduction is. A lot of gods can just spam out ability rotations and do consistent DPS the way hunters can anyway. So I don't think the ADC role is particularly strong, and Anher's not like a top pick in the role either. So he's going to the B tier. Anubis, I think, has to go to top picks. Honestly, it's surprising to see. You know, this guy's been bad in Smite 1 for the longest time and only really started seeing play in Smite 1 after like all of the hardcore competitive players moved over to Smite 2. He is genuinely a bit more of a casual player destroyer, but he's been seeing a lot of play in the playoffs as well. The era of Anubis solo appears to be over. We didn't really see any Anubis solo, but he's being played in mid quite a bit. We saw Paul pulling this out. We saw quite a lot of mid laners pulling this out, you know, even though Paul's team lost still. He's a great player, so if he's pulling out Anubis, he's probably doing it for a reason in such a high stakes tournament. The god just does so much damage. He's safer than he was in Smite 1 generally because of how much free protections and lifesteal he gets when he gets low on health. His builds are really good as well in Smite 2 compared to Smite 1. You get a lot of available lifesteal. You can get a lot of ways to keep yourself alive without, you know, necessarily needing to resort to just burning someone down and essentially sacrificing yourself. You can live a lot longer in fights than you used to be able to with Anubis. And of course, his insane damage is there. He literally one-shots you if you don't have beads for his 2 and you don't have any DR on you. He shreds down objectives super well. He's just a really good pick at the moment. Ares, I think I'll throw to the not great tier. Ares saw basically no play at the playoffs, and even before that, we always thought he was definitely one of the lesser pick supports, like not really great, honestly, at the moment in Smite 2. He does a decent amount of damage, but the change to his ult was definitely a change for the worse. You'd think with people having less beads, his ult would be less valuable, but I think the existence of team beads really just hard counters this way too much. Like, you see supports going team beads every single game, and you see solo laners going team beads most games, and you just end up in a situation where like you never really get an Ares ult off on multiple people, because if you just blink it and press it, they're just gonna have beads ready most of the time, the AoE team beads. Athena, I think I'll throw to the mid category. Athena is fine. Athena is playable, but she's definitely not a top pick right now, in my opinion. She didn't see too much play at the playoffs either. And like, yes, she can play multiple roles. She can play support. She plays jungle pretty well in Smite 2 with the damage build, working off of Reach's high scaling. She can play a bit of solo as well. You know, you might even see her pop up in mid occasionally, but I don't think she's like a super top pick by any means. I'd say she's very much a B tier god. The global rotation potential isn't quite as valuable with how open the map is with teleporters and stuff like that. And yes, taunt can be very deadly if you don't beat it and stuff like that. But again, AoE team beats does kind of negate that a little bit. And yeah, just in general, there are better supports to play than Athena. And if you're playing her in jungle, there are better junglers to play a lot of the time. Moving into Bacchus, who I think I'll throw to the good category. I think before the playoffs, I would have had Bacchus down in B tier, but I think we're going to throw him to A tier for this tier list because he did see a decent amount of play, especially in EMEA at the playoffs. He had an insanely positive win rate in the support role. We don't really see Bacchus solo anymore. That's completely fallen off of the map, similar to Anubis solo. But we did see a decent amount of play out of Bacchus support in EMEA. NA didn't prioritize it whatsoever, and I generally do lean more towards NA being the standard for what you should think is good because the competition there is a little bit higher. But at the Georgia LAN event We'll definitely see if that is actually a true statement or not. We'll see if the EMEA teams can hold up to the NA teams or even perform better than them. But at the moment, I think I'm going to give a little more credence to what NA are doing over what EMEA are doing, which is why Bacchus is only in the A tier. But he did have a very good performance in EMEA, an insanely good win rate. I think it was one of the top win rate supports in EMEA for the playoffs. And yeah, he still does Bacchus things like he did in the early days of Smite 2. It's just there's generally been a lot of power creep with better supports being added and stuff, and generally there's better stuff to pick than Bacchus. But he is still good in my opinion, which is why he's in the A tier. Baron Samdi will definitely be our first broken tier god. S+, no question. Baron Samdi is probably the second best god in the game right now. We'll get to who is the best god in the game a little bit further on. And as the tier describes, this god is just broken. He saw an absolute ton of play at the playoffs. NA specifically, he did really well. EMEA, he didn't do quite as well. But NA really showed the potential of this god in both solo and in support. We saw FineOK doing absolute bits with this thing in solo lane. You saw a lot of play in support from a bunch of different players and did really well. His cooldowns are just so low. His CC is so deadly. The heal on his 2 is still completely busted, healing like 600-700 if you're low. The god is just pretty busted, and that hasn't changed even despite all of the nerfs that he's been given. He definitely does need more nerfs. This guy is still broken. Bellona, I'm going to throw to the not great category. I might get some flack for this. I know a lot of people do think Bellona's pretty strong right now, but I just really don't see any reason to pick Bellona over a lot of other solo laners that exist. I don't think she's great right now. Full auto attack solo builds are a little bit lacking at the moment, especially when missing Frostbound Hammer, which is really sad for a pick like Bellona. Yeah, you can still go like Shogun's Kin Size and Berserker Shield and Death's Toll and stuff like that, but the builds are a little bit lacking for AA solo laners in my opinion. And Bellona in general, her kit just isn't really holding up to some of the other stuff that's in the game at the moment. She didn't really get any super interesting +1s either. And even her lane domination that she used to be known for isn't really as prevalent as it used to be. Bellona actually loses some matchups in solo lane now in the early laning phase, which is definitely kind of sad when that was like her main feature. She's okay. She is playable. That's why she's not in the D tier, but I don't think Bellona's great right now. Kernanos, I will throw to the S tier as one of the top picks for the ADC role at the moment. I don't think he's anywhere near the broken tier. Honestly, he's probably verging on being A tier instead of S+ tier, but I'm going to leave him in S for now. He was the top pick basically in both regions. He was picked more than Jingwei. He won generally a little bit more than Jingwei, I think, but they were both around an even win rate. We've definitely seen a rise in Kernanos play with the strength build since they gave him a lot of extra strength scaling and nerfed his int scaling a little bit, so he generally does a lot better with those like standard sort of devos into attack speed into kin size kind of builds. And he's not forced into crit in the same way that Jingwei is. You know, Jingwei's not forced into crit. She can just go no crit and just rely on the 2 for some random damage and stuff, but she has a bit of crit synergy. Kernanos doesn't have that, and kin size is definitely the meta right now in ADC instead of crit. And so Kernanos utilizes that pretty well. He has a big AoE teamfight CC ultimate. He does well in lane. He's just a general well all-round ADC, and was definitely one of the top picks for the role. But as I said, I don't think the ADC role is particularly strong right now, so even a top pick for the ADC role is nowhere near the S+ tier in my opinion. Kernanos is just good. Moving into Chak, who I think I'll throw to the good tier as well. You could argue Chak is probably a top pick with how much he was played in the Founder series, especially in EMEA. EMEA really loved Chak. The solo lane was really like EMEA preferred Chak and NA preferred Armor, but they were both very popular in both regions. And as I said, I prefer NA in terms of the moment at least deciding what is good and what's not. And Amaterasu generally did win more and also played jungle a lot more than Chak did. And yeah, I think Chak is just good right now. If you want to pick him in the solo lane, he's absolutely good. You can play him in jungle if you really want to, but he didn't really see as much jungle success as Armor. I think Chak is just good right now. Okay, here's our first new god from the newest patch. We have Cupid, which I'm not really sure where to put him, to be honest. I don't think I've come to a conclusion on if Cupid's super good or not. I think he's fine. I don't think he's like super broken, honestly, which is kind of surprising given the amount of +1s he got. He basically got like a +5 coming into Smite 2, a bunch of stuff, like pretty much almost a minor rework at that point. And you'd expect him to be super good, but honestly, I think I'm just going to throw him to the A tier for now. I haven't really seen Cupid in my own games doing super well. We obviously don't have any playoffs information for Cupid. He wasn't released by the time the playoffs were happening. So this is all just my personal anecdotal information of what I've seen. So for these 3 gods, Cupid, Poseidon, and Thor, they are going to be a little bit more based on my own opinion because we don't have playoffs information. But I have been paying attention to what other people are saying about these gods or the pros and stuff like that. And Cupid generally seems okay in my opinion. I don't think he's super broken, but I do think he's good, which is why I'm going to throw him to the A tier. Danzaburo will be our first D tier. This guy still sucks. In my last tier list, it was also in the D tier. He hasn't really received much since then, and there's just no reason to pick him over a lot of better ADCs in my opinion. As I said, the ADC role's already bad, and this guy is the worst ADC in the game. He pretty much just is the worst god in the game, in my opinion, by quite a margin. Danzaburo will probably be our only D tier, I think, but we'll see as we go along. Fenrir is an interesting one, so I think for Fenrir, I'm actually going to throw him to the mid tier. This might be a surprising take from a lot of people. Fenrir has been probably up here or up here for basically the entirety of Smite 2's existence, but I think it is time to drop him down some tiers. I already personally felt this way before the playoffs. I felt like Fenrir was falling off pretty massively in the jungle and the support role. You know, due to specific nerfs to him and also due to more characters coming into the game that can more easily counter what he does. You know, more easily stun him out of Brutalize, more easily get out of his ultimate with their CC immune ultimates and stuff like that. A lot more characters have been added to the game since Fenrir was broken, and a lot of them do really well into Fenrir. And I think that really showed at the playoffs. Fenrir had a negative win rate in both regions in any role he was played in. In jungle, in support, in whatever, he had a negative win rate, and he wasn't picked anywhere near as much as you'd expect him to be picked. I think the god can still work, which is why he's in the mid tier. He's not anywhere near down in the C tier or D tier, in my opinion. You know, if anything, he will be up here and not down here. So I do think he's still playable. You can definitely still make Fenrir work, but I think he's 100% fallen off his pedestal as one of the best gods in the game. I don't think he is worth picking over some other junglers now, in my opinion. Hades saw a little bit of play at the playoffs. I think I'm going to throw Hades to the mid tier as well. Generally, I think on my last tier list, he might have been down here, but he has seen a little bit of play. He does bring a lot of pressure and a lot of damage from the solo lane. You can play him in mid or jungle or whatever if you want to as well, but generally, this is mostly a solo lane pick. And yeah, we did see a bit of play from him. Again, similar to Bologna, he doesn't really dominate the lane as hard as he would have done in like Smite 1. There's a lot of picks that can kind of actually shut him out in the laning phase, most notably Sobek with the anti-heal on his 3 and his early wave pressure from Sobek. So there are some matches that Hades does actually lose in the early game, but especially in the mid game, Hades really comes out swinging. His damage is just super high. You can build him with a full damage build. You can build him a little bit bruiser if you want to. And I think the pick is absolutely viable right now, which is why he's in the B tier. Hercules, I think I'll also throw to the B tier. Everyone clearly overreacted to this guy's release. He was nowhere near as broken as everyone thought he was going to be. They've reverted some of the nerfs. I think he's doing okay right now, but I don't see much of a reason to pick him over something like Chak, which is why he's a tier below. He's still fine. He still kind of destroys you with the 2-1 combo if you don't have your beads up or if you didn't buy beads. He can still be very deadly. His ult knock-up is still pretty scary. But generally, he doesn't do anything too crazy compared to some of the other solo laners that you could pick. And I wouldn't say he's like super viable in jungle or support either. You can play him there, but generally is mostly a solo laner. Izanami, I think will drop a tier from where I put her in my last tier list. So we'll throw her into the good category. This is probably honestly overrating Izanami compared to what a lot of people would place her. A lot of people will probably place it down here, but I do think there's some potential in Izanami at the moment that isn't being exploited. She was barely picked in the playoffs, but when she was picked, she did quite well. She had a positive win rate. And especially in non-pro play, Izanami gets a little bit better because there's people that are less coordinated, don't easily know how to punish her lack of CC immunity, don't easily know how to play around her early game wave clear where she just completely dominates. People like fight into the wave, fight into Izanami on the first few waves and end up getting first blooded for it. So she's generally better in lower level play, and she still saw a decent amount of good play in the playoffs as well. She was only picked about like 5 or 6 times or something, but when she was picked, she did quite well. I do think there's some underrated potential in this god, so I'm going to put her in the good tier rather than down in the mid tier. Jingwei will go with Cernanos. These are the 2 top picks for the ADC role right now. Light years better than a lot of the other picks that are available. As I said when I was talking about Cernanos, she does have inherent crit synergy, which isn't amazing in the current meta because you generally do want to be going for a full attack speed kin size pen build rather than going for a crit build with Jingwei. But you can just slot in like 1 crit item. You can just go like 1 Deathbringer and you still have like 50-something% crit chance with your 2 active. And obviously your 2 active is your 2 is active a lot in Smite 2 with Jingwei. And yeah, she's still one of the top ADCs. But again, the reason she's not anywhere near the broken tier, in my opinion, is that the ADC role just isn't amazing right now. And even if you're a top pick in the ADC role, it's probably the worst role in the game at the moment. So I don't see much reason to put them any higher than S tier. Khepri, I think I'll put to the mid tier as well. Khepri just really hasn't seen too much play. I don't think we saw him at all, or maybe like only a couple of games at the playoffs. And yeah, basically he's fine. He does stuff, obviously. Khepri Ultimate is still really powerful and pretty game-changing. You can absolutely win fights that you would never be able to win otherwise with a well-placed Khepri Ultimate. But I do think he does lack a bit of that sort of frontline presence that a lot of the supports in the game are offering you right now. You know, even Baron, he's a little bit more of a backliner support if you're going to play him in that role, but he does have that frontline presence and that CC and lockdown that you're looking for from a support, and Khepri just doesn't really have that. Yeah, it's like a short route and a single target pull. Yes, it can be devastating if you get pulled by that, but it's only single target. And yeah, he generally just lacks a bit of that frontline presence that I think you need in Smite 2 at the moment to be aggressive in the early game. And yeah, I would say he's playable in the support role, but I wouldn't say he's as good as some of the better picks. Kukulkan, I think I will throw to the mid tier. This is definitely an upgrade from my previous tier list. I think I had Kukulkan either here or here on my previous tier list. Kukulkan has definitely started showing up a little bit more. He's by no means one of the best picks in the game or anything, and generally I've been seeing him a little bit more in solo lane. Lycan, if you're watching, good job. With like a little bit of a more bruiser, like tanky build, it's super annoying to deal with. And I think you can probably get away with him in mid, but he's generally not that good either. To be honest, I've talked myself out of it. I'm going to throw him to the C tier. I think he was in D tier on my previous tier list, so he has moved up one since the last one. I do think there's some potential in this god. I think he's playable 100%. But yeah, not great, I think is probably what I would describe him as. I don't think he's as good as some of the picks that are up in this mid tier. Loki goes straight to top picks. That's not Loki, that's Neith. Loki goes straight to S tier, top pick. Best jungler in the game, basically uncontested. His play rate and his win rate in the Founder series was just way above basically any other jungler in the game. He's just uncontested the best jungler in my opinion, but he's not like a broken god, I wouldn't say. He's just really good. The Vanish reset is silly. He can one-shot you through relics a lot of the time. The cripple is super powerful against combat blink. If you got combat blink into Loki, you're screwed yourself, because as soon as you get ulted, you can't blink out, you die. His early pressure is surprisingly good, especially compared to what it was like in Smite 1. His early clear, his early damage is really good. The 3 slow is like super good when a lot of gods don't have mobility to easily escape away from it. Yeah, Loki is still really good. Loki's still a top pick. He's not really been nerfed since then. Neith, I think... Where does Neith go? Is she in C or B tier? I think, honestly, I might throw Neith to the C tier. I think she's fallen off pretty substantially. She did get some buffs recently, but the nerfs to Book of Thoth's Transcendent stacking build, like, that's kind of her whole thing. Cosmic Horror got nerfed as well. Soul Reaver got nerfed as well. Like, a lot of her build has been nerfed over, like, the last month or two. And it's really just hit her super hard. You know, half the reason Neith was good was that really insane build where you would get a Book of Thoth, Trans, Soul Reaver, Cosmic Horror. And every single one of those items has been nerfed. And Neith herself got some individual nerfs, although some of those have been reverted. She's been buffed recently. But yeah, I don't really see much of a reason to play Neith over something like Anhur or Izanami that are higher up on the tier list. So I think she has to go to the C tier. Nemesis, I think I'll throw to B. Nemesis, I haven't really seen much out of her, to be honest. She didn't really see any play in the Founder series whatsoever. And in my personal opinion, she's just mid. She's not great in my opinion, but you can play her. Honestly, a lot of junglers in the game aren't great right now, especially when you compare them to Loki. But yeah, Nemesis, there's not much reason to play Nem over better junglers. Nuwa, I think I'll also throw to the mid tier. She's fine as a mid laner, and she doesn't really see much play anywhere else. There might be some people thinking I'm underrating Nuwa here. I know I do see a lot of sentiment in the community that Nuwa is like actually really strong, and maybe people will put her here or even here or something like that, but I really don't think Nuwa is that great, to be honest. Soul Reaver got nerfed heavy, which definitely hits her pretty hard. Generally, like a lot of intelligence mage items have been nerfed pretty heavily over like the last month or two. And yeah, I don't think there's much reason to play Nuwa over better picks, really. Odin, I think I'll probably also throw to the mid tier. Odin fell off super hard, dude. Odin, similar to Fenrir, you know, used to be one of the top picks in the game. But as more stuff has been added to Smite 2, more gods with jumps and teleports, Combat Blink being added as a relic, Phantom Shell being added as a relic, there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of come into the game that really counters Odin pretty hard. And while yes, some picks have been added that he counters, you know, for example, our next two in Poseidon and Ra, he does really well into. Odin can absolutely be up in the higher tiers in certain matchups. But I think in general, Odin has definitely fallen off. In the Founder series, he was picked a little bit and he had a negative win rate by far in both regions. He really did not do very well compared to better solos like Chaka and Armor and Baron. And yeah, I think being on the level of like Hercules and Hades is probably about where Odin is at right now. He's definitely had a fall from grace. He's not one of the top solo laners anymore by any means. Moving on though, we have Poseidon, who is our next S+ broken god. This is probably, we may order this tier list at some point at the end of the video if you're curious, but I think Poseidon is the best god in the game right now. I think he's ever so slightly better than Baron. I've made a whole rant on this god and why he's so stupid. All of his base abilities are on 10-second cooldowns. I have no idea why. His 2 was on 15 seconds in Smite 1 and they just decided, fuck it, let's give him a bunch of buffs to his 2 and 1 and make them on 10-second cooldowns in Smite 2. His base cooldowns are just stupid. Kraken is insane because you need 2 relics to realistically counter it. You need either Beats Blink or you need Beats Aegis, and unless you're going like Aegis and then buying the Beats active, which kind of fucks over your build, you can't really fully counter the Kraken. And even then, it gets to such a low cooldown with how available CDR is in the game right now. It gets to like a 45-50 second cooldown, and you just can't really counter that. His damage is ridiculous. His mobility is ridiculous. He's surprisingly safe given how he can just run away from literally everything. The god is just insane right now. I probably don't need too much explanation on why Poseidon is broken. I think you've all, anyone that's played against him will know what I'm talking about. The god is broken, definitely S+. Ra, I think I'll throw to the good tier. You could argue I'm sleeping on Ra a little bit, but honestly, I'm not super hyped on Ra. The only reason he was seeing a ton of play was from the solo lane, and even in the Founder series, before they gave his 2 the nerfs to solo lane specifically, he didn't do that well. I think he had a basically even win rate, and he wasn't picked all that much compared to stuff like Chaka and Armor. And since then, we've had a patch that massively nerfed his 2's base damage in the early game to where his like soul limb wave pressure isn't quite as stupid anymore. And while yes, the build with like Phoenix Shield and Glad Shield is still really strong, Ra can absolutely still see play in the soul lane. That's why he's in the good tier. And I think his mid lane is actually pretty underrated, honestly. He does do a lot of damage. He does have that team healing that's really valuable for like late game team fights and stuff like that. But I do think Ra is being a little overrated by people at the moment. I think good tier is a good place for him. Sobek, I think, will be our next S+ Broken God. I don't think he's anywhere near on the level of Baron and Poseidon. I will say that now, but I do think he's better than the picks that are in the S tier. Great in solo lane, great in support. His disruption is insane. He has an execute now. His 3 is one of the best abilities in the game right now, I feel like. The cooldown's just so low. It has anti-heal. It has healing. It does great damage. It spreads the poison. Lack of beads is really important for his plucks, just getting a ton more value. Sobek is definitely one of the best gods in the game right now from both support and from solo. In the Founder series, he had great performances in both. NA generally played him more as a support, and EMEA generally played him more as a solo laner, but in both regions he had positive win rates and good pick rates. He was doing really well. Sol, I think I'll throw to the C tier. Sol is really not good right now, about on the level of Neith, I would say, for the ADC role, and you can't really play her in mid either. A lot of the reason Sol was like super strong in the early days of Smite 2 was 1, there was less gods available, so she just seemed stronger than she was, and 2, she was a really good user of crit because it synergizes with her passive super well. And crit is really not in the meta right now, as we discussed earlier in this tier list. So the reason Sol was strong is really kind of bad at the moment. And yeah, she's definitely just fallen off substantially. Susanoo, I'm going to have a hot take here and put Susanoo to the good tier. I know a lot of people right now in the community are saying Susanoo's pretty bad and they might put him like here or something like that. But I do still think there's a lot of potential in Susanoo. I think he can do a lot of work. In the Founder series, EMEA specifically pulled him out more than NA did, and he had a very good win rate there. Granted, it was a very small sample size. I think it was like 6 games that he won 4, lost 2. So like there's really a small sample size on this god. He didn't see too much play in the Founder series. And I think probably a large part of why you saw the amount of play that he did is just because if Loki's banned, what else do you play in the jungle? Or Loki and Armor, I guess. People resorted to Armor jungle because Loki's kind of the only good assassin in Smite 2 right now, or the only really good assassin anyway. And so if like Armor was banned and Loki was picked or something, you pretty much just went to Susanoo. Or like if Armor was picked in solo and Loki was picked in jungle, you kind of just go to Susanoo as like the next best jungler, really. This is for the Founder series, of course. I'm not counting Thor here because he wasn't released for the Founder series. But I do think Susanoo's a bit underrated right now. His ultimate, yes, it still feels kind of bad. It still kind of is bad compared to Smite 1, but his base kit does so much damage. You can very easily get into an hour fight. So I do think Susanoo is underrated right now, which is why I'm going to throw him to the good tier. Thanatos, probably another hot take. I'm going to throw us to the same tier as Susanoo. In the Founder series, we saw Ratmilk pulling out this god and a couple of other players and doing really well with it. And in my personal anecdotal experience, I've been playing a bit more Thanatos lately, and he snowballs super hard, man. It's like we're back to Smite 1 levels of Thanatos snowballing the game, which is kind of insane. In the early days of Smite 2, it felt like, you know, the only strength of Thanatos being his early game was not really any stronger than other junglers early game, but now it really does feel stronger. It feels like Death Sight is chunking. Feels like the flat pen on his 2 is getting the value that it really should have been getting. His damage is insanely high because of the flat pen on his 2. Flat pen is very unavailable in Smite 2, but Thanatos has like a free 20 or 25 on his 2. And tanks are really strong right now. Baron, Sobek, Amaterasu, Chak. A lot of tanks are super strong, and the execute gets a lot of value. I think Thanatos was being underrated prior to the playoffs. Maybe he's being adequately rated now because a lot of people saw how good he was at the playoffs. But yeah, in my personal games as well, I've been doing super well with Thanatos. I think he's definitely one of the better junglers in the game, which is a big leap from my previous tier list where I think he might have been down here. Morrigan, I will also throw to the good tier. Morrigan saw a good amount of play at the playoffs. Morrigan was super strong there. I don't think she's quite in the top picks category, in my opinion. I think she's more of something you would fall back to if better mid laners like a Kate and Anubis and Poseidon and Baron are banned. But yeah, she is super good. Her base kit feels like it doesn't quite have the levels of one-shot potential that she had in Smite 1, but her ultimate is even better than in Smite 1 for the specific reason that you get the enemy's relic off of cooldown no matter what. So you can blink in or whatever. This is just an example. You probably don't got blink on Morrigan, but you can blink in, transform into someone, and then have their blink ready as well for like follow-up or getting out or whatever, which is really strong. And you can also just get copies of the broken gods. Like you can just become Poseidon, you can become Baron, you can become Sobek, and that is really powerful when some outliers at the top of the meta in Smite 2 are just far above the rest right now. You know, if you pick Poseidon and then the enemy team picks Baron, Sobek, you can pick Morrigan and have one of Baron or Sobek in a lot of team fights, and that is really valuable. Moving on though, we have Thor, who I think I'll throw to the top picks. Thor did seem to be underperforming on release, but they gave him some buffs, and I think people have figured out that Thor is still doing Thor things. He still can one-shot you, and with less people going beads, it makes Thor even stronger, because if you don't beat his ult and it hits on you, you just die pretty much if the Thor is even or ahead. And yeah, I do think Thor is good right now. I don't think he needs any more buffs. I think Thor is definitely among the top junglers. He's worse than Loki, I would say, but not by a massive amount, not by enough that I would drop him onto the level of Susanoo and Thanatos. I think he is better than those two picks, which is why he's in S tier. But yeah, I do think he's a little worse than Loki, but I think he's still good right now. Yemoja will throw to the S tier. I think Yemoja is verging on S+, especially for pro play, but in more casual play, she won't be as good, of course. Yemoja's always been one of those characters where it's much harder and you need a bit of team communication to make her work properly. But she saw a ton of play at the Founder Series. She had very good win rates. EMEA especially did really well with Yemoja. Again, as I said, I generally lean more towards NA than EMEA, but she had an insanely good win rate. I think she went like 16-7 in the support role or something in EMEA, which is kind of insane. And yeah, with less people picking up Phantom Shell, with less people having jumps and stuff to get away, a lot of the top picks like Baron and Sobek and Poseidon, none of them can get out of Yemoja walls. So if you get a good true cage in the jungle, she can be super powerful. Her early pressure is insane, of course, thanks to Omi. She just does a lot of stuff. Yemoja, we've all seen her in Smite 1 for the longest time being broken. She's pretty broken in Smite 2 as well. Yumiya, I will throw to the good tier. Yumiya had a surprisingly good performance from the support role that I wasn't expecting out of the playoffs. EMEA valued him especially. He was, I think, the highest win rate support in EMEA, and he was picked a lot. I think he went like 15-7 or something, which makes me think Yemoja probably didn't go 16-7. She might have been like 16-8 or something, and Yumiya was 15-7. So he was the highest win rate support in EMEA. He saw a little bit of play in NA and did pretty well too. So yeah, Yumiya surprised me a little bit. I do think he's good right now, but I think we'll throw him to the A tier. Next up is Zeus, who will fall 1 tier in this tier list, in my opinion. In the playoffs, he did extremely poorly. He did okay in the ADC role. He did see a little bit of play, about like 6 or 7 games in each region in the ADC role, and had a positive win rate in both regions for ADC. He did see more play in mid though. You know, he might have had like 5 or 6 games in each region in the ADC role. He had like 30 games in each region in mid, and he had a really bad win rate, especially in NA. I think Zeus did really badly. I think he had like a 30% win rate or something stupid. And yeah, it seems like the pros have figured out how to deal with Zeus. Generally, he will stomp casuals a little bit more than he will stomp coordinated lobbies where they can exploit his lack of mobility and CC immunity. The god still does a crap ton of damage though. If you let Zeus free cast, he will obliterate your entire team in a matter of seconds. So that's why I think he's still in the S tier in my opinion. I don't think he's dropped any lower than that. I think the god is still really good, but I don't think he's anywhere near on the level of Sobek, Poseidon, and Baron in my opinion. After the playoffs, we've really seen that Zeus can be dealt with. But yeah, as I said, in casuals, it can be a little bit harder to deal with him without the coordination. Next up, we have Mordred, who I think I'll throw to the mid tier. I think he's about on the level of stuff like Hades and Hercules and Odin. Like, you can definitely play him, you can get away with it, but I don't think he's as good as something like Shark or Armor or anything like that. Mordred's fine, you can definitely play him, but he's not amazing at the moment. And finally, we have Hecate, who I'm going to throw to the S+ tier as well. This is 1 tier up, I believe, from my previous tier list, where I think she sat down here. That weekend of playoffs has really shown the potential with this god. In NA, she absolutely obliterated. I think she went like 20-7 or something in NA, which is just insane. The god is clearly broken. She does so much damage, so much utility from the mid lane. And while I don't think she's quite as broken as like a Poseidon or a Baron, I would say she's about on the level of a Sobek. That's how strong I think Hecate is right now. Absolutely the second best mid laner after Poseidon, in my opinion. And at the playoffs, she was the best mid laner. But yeah, that is the tier list. I guess we'll go through and order it now, just because there's quite a few gods in Smite 2 right now. We could probably get away with ordering the tier list. So Poseidon better than Baron. Hecate probably worse than Sobek, but it's very close. In terms of the S tier, I think Yemoja's probably up here. Zeus is probably up here. Armor's probably fine there. I think I will put Loki over Anubis and then Thor like right here. I think that's probably how I would order the S tier. For the A tier, I think Chak and Morrigan specifically go right to the top. Yumiya probably as well. Cupid, I'm not really sure. Cupid is an army. I'm really not really sure if they're like super good right now or just like pretty good. Ra probably goes above these guys. Thanatos and Susanoo probably say about that. I think that's good for the A tier. For B tier, I think Fenrir probably does reside at the top of B tier. Even though he's fallen off, he is still pretty good. Kepri probably deserves to be near the top here, and her as well. Nuwa is probably better than a lot of these picks. Hercules probably better than Hades, in my opinion. Hercules maybe even better than Athena, but I think we'll leave it like that for now. And yeah, that's probably about right for the B tier, in my opinion. For the C tier, Ares is definitely at the bottom, in my opinion. Actually, no, Bellona's at the bottom, and then Ares. Cuckoo. Neith is probably better than Cuckoo. Yeah, that's probably where the C tier stands, and then there's no need to order the D tier. It's just D tier for Danzaburo tier down there. He's absolute trash, dude. But yeah, that is my full Smite 2 tier list with the playoffs accounted for. Everything that we saw pulled out, and everything that we saw that didn't do too great. Hopefully, this has been helpful to you in terms of figuring out what's super strong in the meta. Hopefully, I explained it relatively well, and you understand why some of these picks are why they are. And I will catch you guys for another update to this tier list probably after the Georgia LAN. That's when the competition's really going to heat up. We're probably going to see see a bunch of different stuff pulled out. A lot more gods will be available. You know, Thor, Poseidon, and Cupid will be available at the Georgia LAN. So we'll see how that goes. I'll definitely make another tier list after that, like sort of prior to Vegas, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.